But if anyone can do it, it's Woj. So let me turn to you on that, Woj. The Lakers, they have that man. They have Russell Westbrook, who's always in the middle of all of these conversations. There's Kyrie Irving dangling out there, and it cannot be a coincidence that Kyrie Irving has spent the last 2 weeks very visibly in Los Angeles. And then you pointed out in our first hour this morning that there were other maybe less high-profile kind of moves they could make, reasonably speaking. Between now and October, what could we see the Lakers doing to try and get LeBron out of tennis?
Listen, I think the Lakers will make a deal, maybe more than one deal. Now, it may not be for Kyrie Irving. It may not be for an all-NBA player, an all-star, but players like Eric Gordon in Houston, Buddy Hield in Indiana. There's players like Patrick Beverley, who came to the Jazz in a trade from Minnesota, who are role players on winning teams. What is the price for those kind of moves? I think they're going to continue to be active in all those things. It's not completely dead with Brooklyn, but I think so much depends on what happens with Kevin Durant. The Nets are more focused. They are focused on trying to find a deal for KD before they would even, I think, move Kyrie Irving. And I think there's a good chance that Kyrie Irving is back in Brooklyn to start the season if Kevin Durant is back in Brooklyn. But I don't think the Lakers are done. I think they're trying to find deals that allow them to improve without gassing all of their assets. I think teams feel like when LeBron's putting pressure on the front office, on the organization, teams are asking for a lot to do a deal with the Lakers. Rob Pelinka's trying to keep from trading the 2027, 2029 unprotected first-round picks that obviously LeBron James doesn't value greatly because he may not be around, or, again, he wants to win now, and that's the balance of being in the front office versus having to serve the fact that you've got LeBron James still playing at an incredibly high level at an age we've never seen a player play at that level, and you're hoping you have a healthy Anthony Davis back.
And to Adrian's point, Eric Gordon, Buddy Hield, Patrick Beverley, all would be massive upgrades on the guys that are around LeBron James. Now, this isn't about just necessarily getting a superstar like Kyrie Irving. This is about getting just better talent on the roster. They just don't have a.
Well, since we were last all together anyway, Russell Westbrook and his agent, longtime agent, have parted ways. This is the agent who he's been with basically going back to right when he came out of college. And they parted ways, and the agent released a statement that I think gives us some interesting insight into where Westbrook's head might be right now. Woj, pick it up from there. What do we think Russell Westbrook is suggesting here when the agent tells us that he thinks Westbrook wants to move on?
In my conversations with Russell Westbrook in this offseason, I think as much as anything, he wants to be wanted. But look at his actions since the season ended. At the press conference for Darvin Ham and building a relationship with his new coach. They have spent time talking, texting, communicating, and trying to figure out the best way to use Russell Westbrook, if he's there this year, to maximize him for that team. And then Summer League last week in Vegas, Russell Westbrook comes to town. He's sitting by the Laker bench with their young players. He's with them going in to halftime. So I think Russell Westbrook, he wants to have success in LA. This is his fourth team in 4 years. His family, obviously that was a big part of this, being able to go back to LA. He's been an integral part of that community. He grew up there. He doesn't want to bounce around every year. And this was, in a lot of ways, a dream scenario to go back there. Last year did not go well. It didn't go well for him. Didn't go well for others on the Lakers. But I think for Westbrook, he wants to make this work, but he also knows he's been in trade talks. He continues to be in trade talks. And if there were teams who landed him, who had big cap space and had a really young team, they may not want a player at his stage in his career playing a lot of minutes or even necessarily being on a team because they're in full rebuilds. So it leads to certainly some uncertainty about what next year looks like for him.
To Adrian's point about Russell Westbrook and him being in trade talks, that message LeBron James was saying was, I know this team isn't good enough. And that's why he wants to play by himself, right? Because if it's him against everybody else, you might still pick LeBron over anybody in the league if you're trying to win one game. But you need 15 guys to win. And as we know, the Lakers, for a variety of reasons, have a roster that's very limited. And when you look at the Western Conference, to me, it's hard to see the Lakers being out of the play-in tournament mix, let alone being a team that's competing for championships, which is why, obviously, the Kyrie Irving situation sitting out there is sort of the one Hail Mary the Lakers have, that if that can come together, great. But as Adrian has reported a bunch, and as we've talked about a bunch, The Lakers are dependent on the Nets doing something there. It's not that the Lakers can go get something done. They're stuck. And so LeBron knows that, and that's why they are where they are.
Well, that's what I keep coming back to, Woj. I keep saying, and I don't mean this to sound as disrespectful to Russell Westbrook as I know it would appear, because he's had a great career, and who knows, maybe he does still have something left. He's a first ballot Hall of Fame player. But based upon how bad the fit is, if they could turn Russell Westbrook into Kyrie Irving, that would be a basketball miracle. That would take the Lakers from a place where they realistically have no chance to really compete to a team that, Alan, a lot of people I talk to think could be a legitimate contender. Maybe not the favorite in the Western Conference, but you certainly wouldn't put it past them.
No, but you'd also have to, and again, I'm going to look at this from Jeannie Buss's eyes. I do think there is a bit of trepidation here after what you just saw happen across the river in Brooklyn the last year or two, where, you know, will the same thing come here now? Will we have to put up with some of this stuff because you know what precedes Kyrie Irving at this point in his career? But you have LeBron, and your hope is that he will have a little bit more of a leadership voice with Kyrie to not necessarily keep him in line. I don't think that's the right word, but I do think it's more or less keep him motivated to play basketball regularly and help them win.
Well, and so that, Woj, then brings us to what I think is really the question here. Can the Lakers do that? We've talked about it a lot last week. Tim just said it's dependent on the Nets. The Nets have to make the first move here. Walk us through what exactly we have with Kyrie Irving right now.
Hey, the Nets right now are focused on trying to find a Kevin Durant deal. I would be surprised if they did a Kyrie Irving trade, even if they do one at all, before they figure out what Kevin Durant's future is, whether that's getting traded before the season or perhaps does it become him starting at least training camp in Brooklyn. And I think for the Lakers, there's more out there for them than just Kyrie Irving. They have, you know, whether it's Eric Gordon. Now, these aren't all-star level players, but Eric Gordon, who certainly brings shooting, Buddy Hield from the Pacers. Those are two players they've talked about, both former Rob Pelinka clients from his agent days. And I still think there are other scenarios out there that maybe they're certainly not the level. There aren't many Kyrie Irvings out there, and they're certainly not available in trades. What the Lakers are trying to avoid is just absolutely mortgaging all of their future to get off of a contract, 2027 first-round pick, 2029 first-round pick. And I think right now, Brooklyn is going to deal with the Kevin Durant situation. I think, if at all, they're going to move Kyrie Irving.
And so maybe, Tim, to go back to the very beginning, that's the message LeBron is sending, which is my future is a year or two to be the player you're suggesting he still is, which I thoroughly agree.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about 27 and 29 and all these others, and I don't want you worrying about those either, particularly when I have a decision about my own future to make.
Yeah, I mean, what
month.
have we seen for the past decade? It's been every time LeBron James has been on a team, he's wanted them to do more to win now, right? And that's certainly going to be the case when he wasn't in the playoffs last year, when he's missed the playoffs, you know, a couple times in recent years. I mean, look, Alan said it in the meeting this morning. We haven't seen LeBron James in months, right? Comes out and plays in this game this weekend. Everybody's talking about LeBron James again, talking about it being a competitor again, talking about being the best player maybe in the world again. That's why he did that this weekend.
Historically, when LeBron James leaves a franchise, they rarely have a lot of draft picks left, right?
Yes.
He never leaves a team, and it's like, look, they're loaded with 8 number ones. They're ready to go trade, right? You're always trying to win right now with LeBron James. That's not unusual, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with it.
Right, and it's a price that Miami was willing to pay with 2 championships, with Cleveland winning a title the second time. And the Lakers have won a championship, but it's how deep is there a deal you can make without absolutely gutting all your assets? That's a GM's job to figure out that fine line and to not just jump into the first deal available there. But certainly there's still pressure on the Lakers to improve that roster before trading.
All right, we'll have much more on this as